So let's talk about a few of the required tools and some of the process that we'll go through in gluing together your flute blanks. So at this point, you want to make sure that your flute blanks, that you've established the cutting edge. If you haven't done that, go over to our video. Again, look at establishing the cutting edge and make sure that you come back at the point to where you're ready to glue together. So a few of the tools involved, or at least what I use. Certainly what you use could be different, but I've established these as some of the best practices, and it makes life a lot easier in the glue up process. So the first big question that I get is, what type of glue do you use? Well, I use Titebond 3. Now, there's other great glues out there, but Titebond 3 is a waterproof interior-exterior type glue. They do have a Titebond 2 and a 1. I think it holds quite well regardless of whether it's 1, 2, or 3, but the 3 just seems to have better sealing power than what I've experienced with other glues. So I would recommend Titebond 3, waterproof. Certainly water or moisture coming through your flute is the enemy of a good sounding flute, right? So the next thing is I have some different sizes of blue tape, okay? You could certainly use green tape, masking tape. I wouldn't recommend using duct tape or packing tape because it'll leave a sticky residue behind. And here in a second I'll show you a process that we're going to use for this blue tape. So again, I've got, I think it's the 1 inch and the 2 inch. You could certainly just get, one size, but some blue tape, green tape, painter's tape is great stuff to have. I use some glue up brushes. You could use the foam brushes, but you want to make sure that when you're putting your glue down that you don't leave any residue behind, whether it be pieces of foam if it's a foam brush, or little fibers from your paint brushes. But couple paint brushes is great to have as well. Another couple pieces which is a little bit unique is a couple of just wooden dowels, okay? This is a 1 inch wooden dowel, and this is a 3/8 wooden dowel. So the flute blank that we are to glue up here in a minute is actually a 30-inch flute blank with a 1 inch bore. Now you'll probably know on our website that we have the 1 inch bores, we have the 7/8, we have 5/8, we have different sizes. So go out to your local hardware store, big box store, grab you some wooden dowels. A 1 inch for a 1 inch bore obviously works quite well. But one thing that you want to do once you get it is cut off about 3 inches of it and lightly sand it to a taper, okay? You probably can't see in this that it's actually tapered, but it's just lightly tapered to one end. You want to do that with both a 3/8, because we'll use this for the blowhole, and a 1 inch for a 1 inch chamber. And certainly if you're doing other flutes, you can get different sizes. But go ahead and cut you about 3 inches, taper them lightly, and we'll show you here in a minute what we're going to use those for. The next thing is I use an all thread and a piece of a rifle cleaning kit, but what I do with these is what I call punching the bore, okay? So part of this process that we're going to go through in the glue up, we obviously have two pieces of material coming together. You're going to have glue squeeze out, right? So inside your chamber, which again, if you remember what we were talking about with airflow, anything that impedes the airflow or slows it down and restricts it, i.e. glue squeeze out, is going to affect the quality of the flute, right? So once we get it glued together, or clamped together I should say, we're obviously going to have some squeeze out inside. So how do we get to that squeeze out? That's where I've come up with a piece of all thread. Now this is just I think it's a 3/8 or maybe even smaller, doesn't necessarily matter. But a piece of all thread. This one is, I don't know, 24 inches long. You certainly want it as long as whatever flute blank that you're gluing together, or flute halves that you're gluing together. Another thing is this is a 22 rifle cleaning rod. You certainly don't have to have that if you don't have cleaning kits. You could use a wooden dowel, but the nice thing about this is, number one, it's very small because we're going to use this on the blowhole side, and it has sort of this brush in, and you'll see why here in a minute that the brush comes in so handy when we actually swab or clean out, punch the bore, so to say, of the flute blank. So that'll come in quite handy. Another thing that I've come up with is again a wooden dowel. This is actually a oak wooden dowel. Doesn't necessarily matter if it's oak or anything, but it's really long. So this one's probably about 3 feet long, and in the end I've just carved out with some chisels and drill a slot. And what we do with that slot is we take some pieces of rag cloth and I cut into strips. So another thing that you will need is some towel cloths that you can cut into various different strips. Now the strips that I cut are about, I don't know, about 1 inch wide. Some of them are quite wider. This one, is maybe, 4 or 5 inches, okay? And what we're going to do with those is actually put them through our punch rods, if you want to call them that, and we're going to make sort of a big swab, okay? So with this, well, you can actually get this wet, and I've got a cup of water over here, or you could get a pan of water, a bowl of water, whatever, and you'll want to lightly saturate these rags because using Titebond 3 and other wood glue, it's water soluble. So we can easily clean up our chambers with lightly saturating these rags, putting them into our cleaning rods, our bore punching rods, and actually rolling them up to kind of create this big swab, if you will, okay? And at that point, what's going to happen is we will actually be putting this into, and this is a much smaller flute, but if it was a 1 inch, we'd actually be able to use this as a swab to kind of punch in and clean the inside of the bore. And you'll see that when we do the glue up process. So get yourself some nice clean rags, make sure there's no oil on them, and have them ready and cut into strips so that we can use some of them for cleaning out the glue squeeze. Another couple items, I've got just a few different size files, an X-Acto, and small needle nose pliers. And really, these are just kind of extra type things. It isn't required, but you may want to try to get a piece of the cloth out of like the blowhole or something. You may want to kind of clean up some areas with a file, that type of thing, before the glue dries. So certainly something that you can poke around and kind of dig around with is kind of handy. So those are the tools that we recommend. Here in a minute, we'll actually go through the process of the glue up, and we'll show you how that process works.